Welcome, Legionnaires, to the Long Live the Legion podcast, where we talk about the Legion of Superheroes comic book team and break subjects down so that whether you're just out of the Legion Academy or you're a longtime veteran, you get to know the team a little better. I'm your co-host, Jay.
And I'm your co-host, Jim.
Welcome to episode 39. What's on our mission monitor board today, Jim?
Well, if you all remember, a few months ago, we were talking about the Paul Levitt's V2 run of Legion of Superheroes. And for that, we had our special guest who's rejoining us today to talk about the next phase of Paul Levitt's run in the Legion, Mr. Alex Segura. Welcome back, Alex.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, this was fun because I know I did a lot of reading of this run. It was fun to relive it all while I was kind of going through the art and the books. And I know when we had talked about the prior Levitt's run, which you were very much into, you really appreciated it. You were like, I got to come back for V3.
Yeah, please.
Yes, you made the horrible mistake of saying that, and we said, and we immediately were like, we're gonna get you into this. So.
You emailed immediately and were like, here's where we're available. It was very, very diligent, which is good.
It's an easy part of Legion history to talk about because I think, Alex, you have the same take on this that I do, which is this is peak Legion. And so spending time talking about it is so simple. Like research is not hard because it's just a joy to read these comics again.
Mm-hmm.
And I always hate to use this phrase, but like, this is my Legion. This is the Legion that I grew up on. This is the one that I kind of respond to the best. I think it's one of those where just as a fan, it's really fun to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just really great superhero team comics in an era that was pretty full of great superhero team, like New Teen Titans and Uncanny X-Men and Legion. Those were the big three in terms of amazing super teams of that era. But it's really Paul at his peak, just like the master plotter. And I do feel like Greg LaRocque gets short shrift a lot in a lot of Legion conversations. And he went on to more stuff with The Flash and beyond, but I think his Legion work is so impressive.
Yeah, I agree. And this run is very distinctive too. It's one of the very few of all the whatever versions we have. I think we have we will have 9 versions of Legion of Superhero comics.
Is it 9? Wow.
Yeah. When you look at all the volumes, once Josh and Hayden release theirs, that's going to be V9. And then there's The Legion and Legion Lost, and there's 2 of those, right? So a Legion of Superheroes, there will be 9 distinct volumes that bore that title. This is one of only a couple where it is the same run, the same kind of continuity, it's the same structure and style from beginning to end. Because everything else, like the original, I guess V1 was just a compilation of a bunch of early Silver Age. V2 used to be Superboy, then it changed to Superboy and the Legion, and then finally Legion of Superheroes. Right. And then this is the third one. And then we get V4, but V4 has 5 years later, and then the reboot. And then actually, I guess the reboot would be the next one that actually is a distinct run, but you still have kind of a little bit of interruption there too.
You have the shooter intermission or coda to the 3-boot. I did find it fascinating that I guess it was a different time. It was a different time that the 0 Hour reboot did not start renumbering because it was so confusing to me as I was finishing 5 years later. And then I was like, do I continue or not? I was like, oh, it is literally the next issue. I was like, this is bonkers. But,
yeah. Well, we actually talked to Jeff Moy about that. And he said, at the time, we didn't want to confuse anybody because they rebooted Legionnaires and it was like issue 17 or 18. And, they were like, okay, nobody's going to take us seriously if we're just rebooting a series after 17 issues. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
2026 is laughing at us now. So.
Yeah. Now you're like, if you get to 10.
Yeah, exactly.
What was weird at the time is like there was so many first issues. Like it was even at that era, you could tell the first issues were pushing sales. And I mean, not rebooting the Legion, the main title, to go from they were in the 60s when when it got rebooted. I'm like just end it and do a new number one, but
because they had the 0 issues too. So it was like it's a perfect moment to go from 0 to 1.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's really kind of scratches up my OCD about all that stuff.
I know.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's very difficult when you tell people, okay, here's how you should read it. And then you have to go into this big discourse about, okay, it's 0, but then you have to restart back at the other number. And it's
right. Anyway.
And don't forget the million issue that comes out later on in that run where it's like that great crossover of what were they thinking? Anyways.
Yeah.
let's start with a little bit of sort of how we get into this new volume 3. And I know we've talked about it before on the podcast, but it's really weird to talk about what was going on in comics now, especially coming from a 2026 perspective, and why this volume 3 exists and why DC did what it did. So when I think of this, I never call it volume 3. I always call it Baxter. I call it the Baxter series because that's the paper that they used. And it was this acid-free white paper, really nice. And I say this as someone who owns all of the floppies, they're still in great condition. Like the paper is still good after almost 40 years. So DC, basically said, we're not selling it. We're not selling in convenience stores. We're not selling on spinner racks. And also, they were losing so much money on returns. And here's another thing that breaks the brain of anybody who doesn't know publishing. Prior to this, a store would order the comics, and whatever they didn't sell, they'd just rip off the covers, ship them back, and then get their money back.
Yep.
Right? From the newsstands. And DC's like, this is a money-losing model. And it's not a surprise. Like if you look back at the sales in the 70s, you'll see they publish like 200,000 copies, but they only sell 100,000. So they're literally double publishing everything, knowing it's all going to come back, right? It's just crazy, but that's how they did it. And so they said, we want to go direct. So if you buy this comic, you can't return it. And we're going to make it better paper, better art, better everything. So it's kind of a better product for comic stores. And DC said, what are our 2 best-selling titles? And at the time, New Teen Titans, Legion of Superheroes. So that's what they started with.
Yep.
Now they ended up including, I think it's Omega Man and Vigilante and like Hemlock 3000 was the first one that did this. I know I'm getting back into 80s comics. Sorry.
No, it's good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fun. It's good that we talk about this because I guess I started in 94, right, with the Legion. And like any good obsessive, I got into the Legion, then I need to find out everything that came before about it. And so online at the time, and this is in the Usenet days and AOL and CompuServe, all those services, there were forums that were dedicated to the Legion, and people would be talking about the Baxter Legion. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand what this is. But the thing is that I had been buying Baxter style comics for years because I bought the Titans, right? I was buying the Titans since 1988, and I didn't know that was. I just thought it was just a different comic with better paper. I didn't know that the Baxter paper was the style, and that's what
it's so interesting because in any era after that, it was just the paper stock was improved.
Yeah.
It was you didn't define an era by the paper stock, but it was such a shift to a different channel. Like the idea that this comic was only available in comic shops, and the thing about the newsstand is that you overprinted like almost 3 or 4 times what you sold, and so you just knew going in you were going to have massive losses, and those books would just be pulped or tossed, and every comic had to be written for the casual buyer, like the person that was just at the checkout line. And I know this from Archie, like a lot of the Archie digests or all the Archie digests when I was there, the idea was like, this is candy for someone to pluck as they were checking out their groceries. And I think that was also part of the idea for superhero comics, maybe not as much as those sitcom type stories, but more the idea like any issue is somebody's first.
Yeah.
But the direct market stuff allowed you to really go in the weeds.
Can I go a crazy aside here? Because you just mentioned this. Is Archie still in supermarket shelves? Like where you
last I checked, they were still.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like I think of those digests, like when I was a kid, DC used to print these all the time. It was kind of the very first trade paperback. And it was the exact same as the Archie digests. And that was one of the ways I got into the Legion. I have these great memories of the reprint of Colossal Boy's mom being turned into glass, diamond, something. Yeah, glass.
Yeah, glass.
Yeah. And like, and that was a way to get it. And it was in these stores. And it is very funny now. Like we sit there and think about, well, you go to a comic shop, like there's nowhere else to buy comics, or we go do this, or we don't think about paper stock. We don't think about returns. When you look back at those old issues and you see, especially the newspaper stock, if you're going back and reading the old floppies and it's like, wow, like I can't believe that this is, this is how they were printing it. And then what's funny is when they're reprinting it now, sometimes the color doesn't match. Like
it doesn't sync up. Yeah.
Yeah, like, or it doesn't look as good. Like I still say Tatiana Wood's colors on, say, Swamp Thing was made for newsprint. And then you put it onto good paper and it's just not, because she was an amazing artist. Like those books look so good.
Yeah, she died not too long ago.
Yeah, it just doesn't look the same. Whereas these books, it's made for this clear, crisp white paper. And you see like that very first issue, like when I go back and I do my rereads and I jump from Legion Volume 2, which is on newsprint, and then you open up that first issue. It's kind of like if you've ever, when you watch the original Wizard of Oz and it starts in black and white,
Right,
and then there's that moment where you're like, holy crap, like color. And it's that kind of like, wow factor. And
yeah, I wish I had that experience. I mean, for me, rereading the whole thing mostly digitally is like you get that those overcolored newsprint comics that are almost pop too hard, and then you go into the Baxter building and it's you don't have that shift, that gear shift that I think is part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really sharp.
One of the things that we should probably mention, because of we're talking about the paper styles, is when V3 launched, the original V2 kept on printing, but they changed the name to Tales of the Legion, and then I think it was for a year or maybe a year and a half, they ran original stories that were kind of co-plotted by Paul Levitz and Mindy Newell. And then ran those until those were done, and then they started reprinting the V3 stories on the lesser quality paper, and that's and so those were on the direct market, right?
So the craziest thing about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a year. They do 12 months of new stories in Tales of the New Teen Titans and Tales of the Legion. But yet Legion, all of those Tales stories happen at the same time as issues 1 to 12 of version 3. But in New Teen Titans, they happen after. So if you're reading both stories at the same time in New Teen Titans, you have to go, this happens a year later. And DC didn't, like, there wasn't even a concept of like, hey, maybe we should standardize this. Like, maybe both of these should be the same.
I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah.
Right. It's so funny. I don't want to say like it was, DC kind of kingdoms making their own decisions, which I think has been true forever. But I think it was just, they didn't think that far ahead on it. They were just like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I think it was two hands not talking to each other.
Yeah.
So the Legion stuff, I remember reading it. It's interstitial. Like you hop from one to the other. That's how I found a reading order, and that's how I navigated it.
Right. Yep.
I imagine if you only read the newsstand versions and you're like, okay, so I know that these 5 Legionnaires disappear for a while because they've talked about it in Tales, but I don't see that for 12 months. And then you finally get it. You're like, oh, that's what happened to Ultra Boy. Like, that's why we didn't see him.
Unless you run to the newsstand or the comic book store, you just read the comic real quick and then run.
Yeah.
And another thing I wanted to point out as well that I think is really important with this is at the time, even with the change to Baxter and even with the increased price, which actually if you take into inflation is a little bit more expensive than comics today, these were like New Teen Titans and Legion were still selling. Like I think New Teen Titans in the Baxter was like the 4th or 5th, maybe even higher. And Legion is about 11th or 12th, even with the higher price, even with the fact you can only get it in comic shops. So it was actually like stunningly profitable for DC. Yeah. They were making a lot of money with these. So it did really work well, at least with these 2 books.
So let's start drilling into the actual Baxter Legion. So it was 63 issues plus several annual issues scattered through, and it ran from 1984 through 1989. And the other interesting thing about this particular run, 63 issues plus annuals, all written by Paul Levitz. Yeah. I mean, that is a stretch. And then you have, considering he came off of that other huge run off of the V2 stuff, I mean, that's a long time to be writing any characters.
Yeah. Yeah, not even counting all of V2. Like, that's a huge tenure.
Yeah.
It's almost 100 issues almost.
Yeah. I mean, and I got to say, Alex, you're a writer. What's the longest that you've ever, at one particular stretch, stuck with any particular set of characters or characters?
I think it's probably Dick Tracy, because I've been writing that book, co-writing the book with Mike Moreci. It'll be close to 20 issues, not counting specials and one-offs. So it's about 25 issues or so, which is a notable run now. But I think in the 80s would be kind of like what you would expect going in. I do wonder, I'm sure Paul had some security, but I do wonder what the expectation was when he got the gig. Like, I'm going to be on here. I guess when he launched the book again, he figured I'll be on here for a while, or as long as I want to be, because it's selling so well.
I know he wanted to leave with issue 50.
Yes.
And then Giffen came on and said, just stay for another year until we do the new launch. And I had heard stories that, like, even when he got into volume 3, he'd been kind of had one foot out the door in a lot of because the amount of work he's doing, like, he's running a company at the same time that he's
in-house doing all this stuff.
Yeah. So like, it's the fact that I kind of look back at that and I think he's writing, I'm not going to say the hardest book in DC, but like a challenging team book, because he's writing probably double the number of characters that anybody else is handling. And at the same time, he's pushing DC Comics to again, I don't want to get into a bunch of DC history, but you can make a really big argument that Levitz's influence in the 80s, is some of the most important stuff we're seeing, especially for creators' rights and payment and like everything that he's doing. So it's not like he's, all right, I got this one book to worry about and I'm just going to collect the paychecks on this one.
Yeah, he's definitely not working on scripts at his desk. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, I'm, dealing with contracts or dealing with royalties or, it is very impressive when you think of both things that he's juggling at the same time.
So I'm also fascinated by, a lot of people just assume, Giffen Levitz, that was the Great Darkness Saga, but Giffen comes back toward the end of Volume 2. He's there at the beginning of Volume 3, and he's there at the end of Volume 3, all before doing 5 years later on his own with the beer bombs.
Right.
And I think each era of Giffen looks remarkably different from the one before.
100%.
Like you have the classic Darkness Saga version, and then you have like kind of the Munoz inspired version towards the end of 2. And then at the end of 3, it's presaging 5 years later in a very interesting way.
Absolutely.
And it really goes against the prevailing idea that there's a big shift from the end of the Levitz run to 5 years later. I think Giffen knew where he was going. Mm-hmm. And that to me makes it all the more fascinating to read it all the way through.
Yeah. And, he's never been one to hover in one spot, right? He was always challenging himself, always growing and, trying to find a new way to tell a story visually.
Mm-hmm.
And which is, that's one of the best things about the man,
for sure. I would imagine if you don't know who Keith Giffen is, or if you don't know the artwork, like if somebody's just getting into the Legion and I say, here's the Great Darkness Saga, and I probably wouldn't hand the Omen story, but that's when the Munoz thing kind of takes over, right? Boom. And here's, the Magic Wars. And if you wipe the credits off, they would probably say, yeah, this is 3 different artists.
Mm-hmm.
Like the styles are so different. Yeah. And that was something about Giffen is you just never knew what you were going to get from him. Like you didn't know what style was going to be. It's the same. Like if you kind of go down an ambush bug rabbit hole and you read like the DC Comics Presents one where it's just a straight up superhero story. And then you read any of the ambush bug stuff and you're like, this can't be the same artist. Or if you read, what was the one he did? The one that he did with Robert Loren Fleming after Twitcher. Does that sound right?
Trencher,
and again,
Trencher.
Trencher.
Yeah, for Image. And that was his big
the
Image
art
one.
looks so different. Like it doesn't.
Or the
look
Heckler.
Like
you look at the Heckler and it's completely different from anything else, which I love that book. The thing about Giffen is he's working it out on the page. He didn't strike me as an artist who did a lot of workshopping and then started drawing. It feels like a lot of what he's doing is happening as he draws it. And it's really fascinating to see. And I also find it interesting that a lot of people just think, Levitz Giffen was Great Darkness Saga, but there's really so much more to that partnership.
Let's just talk about sort of, when we talk about Volume 3, like Giffen is there in the very beginning when they do the big first storyline, which is, League of Supervillains. And he's still, I think he did breakdowns by the end of that because Steve Lightle takes over. And you can still kind of feel the Giffen influence even as the series is going on. I think Levitz is just like, here's the visual style that we've created. And I mean, let's be honest, if you're going to borrow somebody's breakdown abilities, Giffen's
there's no
5.
one better.
Yeah, like I mean, he's so good at this, and he's affected so many other artists. Mm-hmm. I think Lightle even has said, like, I learned from these. I know Kevin McGuire said that on JL on Justice.
Yeah,
like I learned from getting these pages how to lay out a page because Giffen.
Yeah, when I was at DC, he was doing all the layouts for 52, the weekly comic book, and I remember we had this big story group meeting. I was a publicist, just kind of a fly on the wall. But he was sitting at the table, he was like, the deadline's the deadline. It's a weekly comic, and I'm going to keep working on breakdowns while we all talk about this stuff. And it was just natural for him. It was pretty amazing.
I actually got into a discussion one time online, and they were basically saying, could you argue that Giffen is in DC history just as important as pick your bigger name creators, right? And say like has he had as big of an effect on DC as, say, Morrison, or say, like just when you look at his body of work and all the different things that he's been involved with. I think even nowadays, I don't think he gets the credit that he probably deserves, because I think a lot of people have missed out what he's done. And this is a series that exists because of him. Like DC's not greenlighting this if Giffen didn't take the entire comic world by storm with his run on the Legion. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, since we're talking about artists and we've already kind of gotten to Keith Giffen, and I want to save the Magic Wars stuff for when we get to the end of it, let's talk a little bit about Steve Lightle, because I did mention him. He comes on, I want to say this is his first published work.
Yeah, what an amazing first gig, right?
Yeah. like, but that's kind of Legion history, right? Welcome to DC Comics. Here's the Legion. I mean, it's Cockrum Grell, like, and just, I mean, I know when I started reading them, it just like blows your mind off the page. This guy, the art is so dynamic. Steve Lightle, you know, I mean, if you're going to give him a criticism, it's that he couldn't hit the deadlines. But I think if he was an artist today, nobody would care. They'd just be like, okay, we're going to give you as much time as you need to get us these 6 issues. But because he joined comics in the 80s, where it's like, nope, 22 pages a month. Like, let's go.
Yeah, you got to make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's just, it's hard. How can you follow Giffen? It's hard, but it's also, he came in with his own style and was being guided by Giffen's layouts, but he's got such a, his line is so fluid, and his masks, he's like great with shadow, and his facial expressions are so good. I think he really made it his own, which is really hard to do. It's like following Kirby on the FF almost. You know, you're following this guy that defined the look of the Legion, even though he was changing the look at his whim. You know, to come in and then also redefine it your own way. I really wish Lytle's run had been longer, especially when he got. Not to say he was bad when he started, but you know, by years later, he was like such a mind-blowingly good artist. Like my first introduction to him was when he was doing those classic X-Men covers. And I was like, who's this guy? And that was a time when the cover artists usually did the interiors. So me not knowing, I'd pick up the classic X-Men and be like, the interiors are John Byrne. Like, you know, there's a disconnect, but he went on to even greater heights.
I wanted to make one last Lytle point, is you talked about how hard it was for him to follow Giffen. And ironically enough, because Giffen's switch to the Munoz style had angered so many Legion fans by that point, like so many people, like it's really weird going back and reading it and going,
oh, interesting.
Like you can see the talent and you can see the work. But at the time, like there were a lot of angry people by this shift. Like, what is he doing? Why is the page like 2/3 black ink? Then in comes Lytle, and it was almost like everyone was like, this is awesome. Like it's back to the way I want a superhero comic to look like. And we get this young talent. So he actually, I would almost say it was almost like, I don't want to say the best way to join the Legion, but not as bad. Like looking back at it, we go, how do you follow Giffen? But at the time, it's kind of like, and I know this is going to sound like a heresy, and I'm going to apologize for that right now. It's like anybody who was following Jack Kirby in like the 70s, because by the time the 70s hit and he's at DC, nobody's like, it's Jack Kirby, and nobody really appreciated what he was doing. We look back at it now and we go, that's amazing. But at the time, fans were going in a different direction. I want it to be Neil Adams. And it's, you know, at the time, I'm sure following Kirby was, okay, this is actually not as big of a deal as I would think.
Yeah, and I think Giffen was such an iconoclast. Like he never changed his style to please anyone. He did it because he felt like it. And he was never thinking about the market or how it would play with readers. To me, it's the best kind of creator because they're not giving you what you want. They're giving you what you need or what they think you need. And that to me makes for an entertaining story or art. But yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to look at it. Lytle probably came in with the wind at his back. If he had some momentum.
Now let's talk about Greg LaRocque. I always mispronounce his name, so I want to make sure I get
Me
that.
too. That's okay.
I'm pretty sure it's LaRocque. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Because in my brain, when I was reading this, it was like always Greg LaRocque. And then I was listening to a podcast and they go LaRocque. And I'm like, I've had this wrong for 30 years. Okay. Like that's.
It's like Carl Kiesel. Like it's Kiesel, I realized over time. And not Kessel, you know, because you think Kessel, like the Kessel run.
Right. How dare you not have your name match Star Wars? Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So Greg LaRocque comes in. I'm glad that you said this at the beginning, Alex, about I think LaRocque does not get the credit he deserves. I think his run on this book as an artist is far better than than I think people were expecting. Especially he was another one of those, like Marvel had kind of drummed him out. He'd done a little bit of Web of Spider-Man. And, and then he kind of couldn't find a gig, and then DC's like, "Hey, I'd like to come draw the Legion." Takes the job on and kind of just hits the ground running. Like he's really strong on what he's doing. He immediately elevates some of the characters, like really makes them look good. I know he's admitted, like, I can draw Dream Girl and Dawnstar all day, and you can see that as you're reading
you can
the
tell,
book.
yeah.
Right?
There are definitely some scenes where Don's at the monitor and you're like, he is enjoying his work.
Yes. Or some of the Dream Girl poses and you're like, okay, that's probably not how a normal person would sit. But I was a 15-year-old boy. I'm like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And I think he's also a precursor to a lot of like the definitive post-Zero Hour Legion artists. Like not post, but like right before Zero Hour, right after, like Chris Sprouse and Stuart Ibben, like these very clean lines, Adam Hughes. And you also see it on the tails with Terry Shoemaker and even early Dan Jurgens with Carl Kiesel inking him. Like it's kind of shifting the look after Giffen to a more clean line. And I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I totally get it.
Yeah.
The funny thing for me though is that, I mean, you can definitely tell the style change between Giffen to Lightle to LaRocque, but to me, even though it's a more, I guess, more serious line than we had prior in V2, and these three are very different. And of course, like you mentioned, Alex, when we get back to the end of V3, Giffen comes back with an even more severe change.
Yeah.
These first three styles, even though they're different, they are visually compatible, I would argue.
Yeah.
Right? Because you tell they're different, but the style is the same, and that handoff of continuity between artists, I thought was great. And when I was going through this, I was forgetting that I was seeing a different artist when the art was switched over.
Interesting. What's also interesting about LaRocque in particular is that he's very inker friendly. Whoever he's being inked by has a very active voice in the look. So I remember it first on Flash because he was inked in large part by Jose Marzan Jr., who has a very clean Carl Kiesel type line. And sometimes he'd be inked by Roy Richardson, who has a little bit more of a sketchier line. Now I'm starting to really kind of hammering myself trying to figure out who inked the bulk of his Legion stuff, because I remember as I read these issues, like it would really depend on the inker. Like if the inker was someone that was simpatico with LaRocque's art, it would look great, and if it wasn't super simpatico, it would just be a little rougher ride. But he's very like Jurgens. Jurgens has had great inkers as well, and I think that he's also very inker friendly.
I've mentioned this a few times, and on the podcast that I was listening to, they were asking me about the Legion art, and LaRocque actually doesn't like his inker, who normally was Mike DiCarlo. That was the guy who normally handled his pages. And he's like, there's maybe one issue that looks like my pencils. And I remember listening and going like, they still look really good. Like I get, if you, like, I can understand him not wanting the heavy inks, and you can see that sometimes the way it's going. But I think it's like anything. Like as an artist, you draw these pages, and in your mind, you're like, this is how I think they should look. And I think with Jose Marzan Jr., like I think with the Flash, he just got LaRocque's work better.
I think it was more like trying to amplify what LaRocque had in mind. Was it mostly DiCarlo? Because DiCarlo has a very strong inking line.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that, I think that's what he had. And I think at the time, the comment he made was something like DiCarlo was inking multiple books. So, or he had his inking factory that was inking multiple books, if that makes any sense.
He was doing a para on Batman, I think, around the same time. Like, I think he was doing like Batman Year 3 and then the Tim Drake stuff, maybe not synchronized, but he was a busy guy.
Yeah. And it's really funny. Like the more interviews I hear with artists, and then it always comes down to, so this inker, and it's always that, this guy was awesome. Well, how about this? I'm just going to go quiet. And you just hear them just go silent.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I've said this quite a bit on other runs of the Legion. The inker can make or break the book a lot of times.
We know how you feel about Legion Lost. But it's such an internal part. I think it's very much lost in the current era because a lot of pencilers are their own inkers as well, which is what it is. But I do miss the kind of mixing and matching of inkers and art and pencilers. You'd be like, oh, okay, like Klaus Janson is doing finishes on this, or here's Al Williamson doing inks on Lee Weeks or John Romita, and you knew it would be elevated because these guys were just great.
Or here's Vince Coletta, and
Preach.
Yeah, you're just like, Yee. So LaRocque lasts until 49, and again has a really nice, actually has one of the longer, I mean, this is sad to say, it's one of the longer artist runs in Legion history, because they tend to burn through artists pretty quickly, or the artist gets popular and is gone. So he does really, really well. And then, he ends up on the Flash, which gets him all the attention. But Giffen comes back with issue 50, and Giffen's back co-plotting and finishes off those last, let's say 14 issues, right? 50 to 63.
Yeah.
It's no drop in the bucket. He's there for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've mentioned this about Giffen's new art style. And so it's not as ink heavy. It's not as dark. It's a little bit, this is going to sound really weird to say, but work with me on this one. There's moments where it feels to me like he's influenced by Kevin Maguire, if that makes any sense. Like there's a lot more open faces, or else he was drawing this and Maguire was copying it on JLA. Like, it just seems like he's kind of adopted that. Because it's not a traditional DC house style at all. Like, he's obviously not going to look like he's going to be working on one of the Triangle superhero comics. But compared to what he had done before it's just less inks, more colors, and he's just changing the future again, which is another thing he doesn't get credit for. Like, every single time he gets on the Legion, he's like, I'm changing everything. So new costumes, new look to Metropolis, new look to the ships. He's just thrown everything out.
I love that he's just this agent of chaos.
And
it's great.
So I'm going to ask this because we're talking about it. So what did we think of the costume change? Because we're going from the traditional, and for a lot of the Legion costumes, they've been that way. I mean, Brainy's had that same costume since the beginning.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Giffen comes in and we've got pouches and we've got everybody's logo on their, like just this little logo on their chest. And we've got lines running everywhere. And Phantom Girl now has a gray patch on her head. And, and it seems like it's a love it or hate it. Like, everybody I've talked to, they're either, I think this is awesome, or they all look horrible.
I mean, I'm a Giffen apologist, so it's like, I loved it. But I also felt like, to my earlier point, it felt like he was taking the opportunity of this run with Paul to kind of not help Paul, but to be with Paul for the end of Paul's run as a dry run for 5 years later.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it wasn't like concrete, but in the back of his mind, I think he was planting some seeds or some like styles to then pick up 5 years later, narratively. But I thought it was cool because, like I told you guys before, I started with 5 years later and then kind of looped around. So by the time I got here, I was like, oh, I see what you're doing there. And maybe it wasn't like an instinctual, like a conscious thing. It was much more instinct, but it works really well.
Yeah, I'll have to check on some of the old Giffen interviews, or maybe, whenever we get to talk to Paul, I'll ask him directly. But yeah, to your point, Alex, it's almost like he was trying ideas out in that last dozen issues or so, based on what he knew he was going to do with the next version.
Yeah, and maybe it wasn't a concrete thing where he had the assignment in hand, but he was maybe like, well, if someone's taking over for Paul, why not? It's like Lord of the Rings, why not? Why can't I take over the Legion?
Here's what I think about, right? When we talk about him trying things out, there's and this is one of the things that I got very confused about when I was picking up back issues after I started reading the reboot. In the beginning of, like, somewhere in the first 6 or dozen issues of 5 years later of V4, there's that bounty hunter that is just this disembodied mouth that's walking around.
Yeah.
And then in the end of Magic Wars, there's the Archmage, who is basically just a disembodied mouth as well. And when I was picking these up, I'm like, are these the same guy? But no, I mean, I'm thinking Levitz was trying that style, that vision out to see how it would translate on a page. And then when he got to actually go into 5 years later, he's like, I'm just going to make this guy a bounty hunter or whatever.
Oh, you mean Giffen? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Giffen rather. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I could see that. I think he was just using the page as a sketchbook, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. He's got the freedom to just say, I'm going to do whatever I want. And there are a few of those issues that really read like Levitt said, just draw 22 pages. I'll put it together. There's a few of them that really feel like it's like Giffen's just like da 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 da. Yeah. Then you get to the end of the issue and it just kind of is there. You're like, did you run out of paper? Like, was it just you realized you hit 22? And I was like, all right, I got to wrap this up.
I don't know. I think that the only reason I think that Paul could have lasted as long as he did was due to the fact that he mapped all these plots out right on the wall. Because I just can't see having the creative well to stick with these characters for such a long time without kind of knowing where I'm going with them. And that's just, I mean, that's hats off.
Yeah, I think his plotting is just, I think the pairing of Levitz and Giffen is very special because you have Paul, who's so structured and, focused, and you can see the A plot become, shift off, and then the B plot becomes the A plot. And I'm not saying it's predictable. I'm saying it's very craftsman-like, which I think is a compliment, especially when you're plotting a mystery like Censor Girl or trying to keep plates spinning. And I think one point I want to get to later is just like how Paul is very much the MVP of managing editorial fiat, but that's later. And so I think Giffen provides this spark of again, chaos to Paul's very structured plots and stories. And that's a very unique chemistry that I liked seeing it at the end because you see the mature version of what started with two younger guys doing Great Darkness.
I think Levitz is such a product of, you can see like he first starts writing in the 70s where there's these strict rules where like, whether it's Weisinger or Orlando or whoever the editors at the time is like, you have 8 pages and you can only have a certain number of words per panel. And you've got this rule and this rule and this rule. And he's talked about this before. And you can see him. I understand the structure. I understand how to do this. I understand how to put together an issue and put together multiple issues, right? And he's keeping track of everything, and he's breaking the rules a little bit, and then Giffen is coming in and going, rules, and then taking a hammer to them. And it's this perfect mesh of one guy who's like, no, we have, like, this is how we do this. And the other guy going, like, no, we don't have to do this at all. Like,
I think we said this last time, but it's a little Lennon-McCartney to it. Like, you have, Paul was a very structured, melodic songwriter, and John was like less a student of music and more like, let me bash out these chords and write about myself, not to elevate. I mean, why not elevate them to that level? I think it really is. It's that give and take that their individual projects were never similar because that unique chemistry.
Yeah, they complemented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned before, like the 3 big team books at the time, and all 3, we talked about this before, and I don't think we can say it enough. Like you've got Wolfman and Perez, who just had this great working relationship where, like, I've heard stories of like plotting was, hey, George, I want to do this. And then George would just go away and draw 22 pages. Or we think of Lee Kirby, kind of the same thing, where it would just be this, conversation. You go, and then, Claremont Byrne or Claremont Cockram, where it's, Claremont is this theater kid who's, has these huge melodramatic ideas. And you've got Byrne who's like, let's convey this and let's go. And it's one of those things where I know I sound like old man shouting at cloud when I say this, but sometimes I kind of wonder if nowadays we just don't have enough respect for like when the pairing works so well, when the writer and the artist are, and as a writer, you've got to appreciate this. Like when you get that artist who just you click with, and I'm not going to ask you to name any because that's just going to start fights, but like it's got to be this feeling of like, wow, like this is better than, I'm not going to say this is better than sex. This is better than almost anything. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said about that shorthand where you can work with an artist and you don't have to over explain it. Oftentimes when you are writing for the big 2, you usually do write full script because you don't know who you're going to be paired up with.
Sure.
And then with creating your own stuff, you seek out a partner and you're like, this is what I have in mind. And then, the best relationships artistically for me are when I can use that shorthand or even go Marvel style and just plot out the story and the artist can kind of extrapolate from that. And then I think you get something special that you didn't have before. So yeah, I mean, it's such a unique alchemy. It's really fun to watch.
Is that how you approach the Forgotten Five?
Yeah. Sarah and I will do like a loose plot and then Dean or Pat will take it from, sometimes we'll say, Pat, this is a 5-page story, and he'll come back and be like, I did it in 12. And you're like, oh, well, that's a little wonky for page count concerns, but also you're a genius. So we'll take it because, and then you just letter over that. And then you're reacting to the art as opposed to telling him he's smiling here. You kind of, you see what they're doing already.
Yeah. No, nice. Well, why don't we start getting into the actual story arcs? We're already talking like for 43 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't even talked about any of the stories yet. So, but you know what? I tell you what, this shows you how impactful this particular era is. So,
yeah.
All right. So we start our full storyline, like you kind of mentioned at the very beginning, Jay, is that the Legion of Super Villains forms and really kicks off this very dynamic, very ambitious storyline. So we kind of pick up after the events of V2, Daxam has been restored from the Great Darkness saga, and all kinds of stuff happens. So we see, I think this is where Saturn Girl gives birth to the single baby that we see initially. We see Ayla gets captured and tortured by her brother, Necht, her older brother. And then we have, obviously, the big confrontation between the Legion of Supervillains and the Legion on Orlando, where Queen Projectra and Val Armour are hanging out.
It's a huge storyline to start with. It's very ambitious. It also shows, I think, one of Levitz's best strengths, which is dealing with the history, but not worshiping the history, if that makes any sense, and doing it in a way that a new reader can understand. Because the big through plot of all of this, and there's a couple of them, is the Karate Kid, Princess Projectra, Nemesis. I always say Nemesis Kid and it's Nemesis Lad because they joined the Legion at the same time. There's been this kind of huge through plot of this, and it's kind of the big resolution of this in that issue 4, Nemesis Lad kills Karate Kid, or beats him to the point where he's willing to sacrifice himself. And then issue 5, we get the huge moment where Projectra executes Nemesis Lad.
Nemesis Kid.
Kind of this huge wrap. Sorry?
It is Nemesis Kid.
I already did it, didn't I? So sorry.
You switched it.
I know. I'll get it wrong all the time because I don't care. Anyway, but
it's one of the two.
He's dead anyway.
Yeah, it's somebody. It's somebody Nemesis something. Like he's like this whole plot, and it's just this perfect, almost like tying a bow on this story from the 60s. But if you haven't read the story from the 60s, you don't need to read it. Like, you understand this. And at the same time, he's also pulling Legion of Superheroes or supervillains back who we haven't seen since the 60s. Right?
Sometime in the 70s, maybe?
Yeah, it just feels very important. What a great, he understood the assignment of relaunching Legion of Superheroes. It felt epic and important. It's Levitz and Giffen. It felt very much like a much anticipated sequel to a big blockbuster. When I started reading it, I was like, okay, now we're really cooking with, like, he's not pulling back on anything. And and I think that kind of holds through for most of the run.
Yeah, I agree. I noted here, not only do you have the big superhero battles, I don't think it's quite a perfect oppositional view, but you almost have a Legion villain paired with their opposite. Right, you have the That's My Kid. I can't remember his name offhand, and then you have Mon-El. So you have these pairings of power sets across the different teams, which I think is really neat. And then you have big fights, you have space battles, it's like the kitchen sink is thrown in this thing, and it's great. It all just is a fun read.
It's the whole premise of each member of the villains is picking a hero to kill. Like, that's the kind of the promise that they've made, is we're all going to kill one of them. So, like, Mech, Lightning Lord gets to say, I'm killing my brother. And, and it's like, this person's going to kill this person. This person's going to kill this person. So it's setting up as this gigantic battle where there's real stakes. The villains have set, this is our goal. We are going to destroy this organization, instead of, like a lot of times when the villains show up, they're like, well, we want to take over this planet, or we want to steal this. And instead we're like, we're killing you. Like, we're not messing around.
We want to kill these people.
Like this is it. Right. And we get some really great one-on-one showdowns. And the other reason why this works, and I'm going to call this out because I've seen this commented on a number of my columns, is the Legion is the best when it's not easy for them. And this is one of those stories where, like, the stakes are so high, and especially when it ends up being 7 of them on Orlando, that's it. Like, the rest of the Legion is back in their own universe, and it's like, okay, the numbers have just dropped and they're facing this threat. And it's kind of funny, like, when the book is called The Legion and you've got all of these heroes, but the best stories are when they're either outmatched or powered or and they've got to work together, or it's just a different way of looking at it. And this is the story that it works so well.
Yeah. And then to explain something that you mentioned there, Jay, is one of the features of this particular storyline is that Orlando actually gets sent into a separate dimension by the LSV. And it's a great read. And kind of like you guys are saying, it's, all bets are off. Nobody's safe. One of the things that you learn after this, Karate Kid is killed by Nemesis Kid. Then Jackie kills Nemesis Kid. And this, you're like, we're very much upping the stakes.
Yeah. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. I knew, having read it in my weird order, I knew that Karate Kid dies at some point. I just didn't see how it happened, see the execution, no pun intended. But it felt very shocking. And I can only imagine what it was like getting the comic every month and just reading that and being like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And being a gigantic Karate Kid fan. Yeah, it was
condolences. Yeah.
It was like just like a gut punch, because I'm like, no. Cause like he's just gotten married. He's retired. Like he's living his life. I'm like, this is awesome. They get to be together. And then
boom,
I'm reading this final fight scene, and let's give Steve Lightle credit. It's his second issue.
Yeah,
and he's like, I got this. And he's knocking it out of the park. It looks beautiful. You can see how completely destroyed Karate Kid is, and they don't hide it. Like he gets his butt kicked.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to ruin their plans because I know I can't win. Flies up, destroys the big power globe. And I know a lot of people hated that, but I thought it was just a perfect, like, this is how Karate Kid should go. Like, right.
Yeah. It's very Flash and Crisis. It's like, if I'm going to die, or Spock and Wrath of Khan, like I'm going to go out saving everybody.
You don't want to be an empty death.
Yeah. And then they end it with, here's the burnt body with the Legion flight ring on it. And I'm just like, what? This is not the Legion that I grew up on.
That's brutal. Yeah, that's brutal. But I mean, it's to Paul's, Paul always says, he's torturing his characters and he has to pick which character to torture. And I think he chose wisely.
So speaking of torturing of characters, there's 2 other things I'm going to mention with regards to things that happen in this particular arc. So almost right off the bat, we get effectively a new version of Shrinking Violet, a brand new character that has nothing to do with what came before, because this is her after she's recovered from her sense tank ordeal and her kidnapping. And, one of the things she does first is go right after Microlab and takes care of him, which was a nice little bit of revenge. Yeah. And then The other thing, which is where the torture comes in, is Mech, like we said before, Mech captures Ayla and tortures her. I think he was just trying to get her to kind of go along with him. I think that was the main source, but he ends up, spoiler, turning her back in the lightning lass, which is the best thing that they did to that character in many, many years.
He wanted her to join him because, well, I mean, this Mech is just full gone. Like there's, like he's
irredeemable at this point. Yeah.
And so he's like, you're going to go with me. And she's like, because he's like, you quit. So obviously you don't like the Legion. And she's like, I didn't quit because I want to be a bad guy. I quit because the Legion sucks. And so he leaves her for dead. He basically is like, all right, I'm going to kill my sister then. And she ends up as Lightning Lass, which, Light Lass is such a hard character to write unless the writer knows what they want to do. And she kind of really got turned into a Timberwolf, what's going on? Timberwolf, what? And it was, it was good to see, like, kind of like with Shrinking Violet, they just said, okay, I've got to start writing her much stronger, much tougher. Let's give her old powers back. Let's make her more effective. And
she becomes a really much more compelling character. And so does Violet. I think after their trauma and their experiences, they become really compelling characters together and apart and just as part of the team.
Yeah.
And then the third female character who would go to this, who would finish this storyline and then become more compelling and more important and more dramatic is Princess Projectra, who again had always been the, hey Val, what are we going to do? And then suddenly she's like, as Queen of Orlando, this is my right, breaks Nemesis Kid's neck. And it's like, you see the crack and then you see the dead body. And I'm like, okay, so she's not a Legionnaire anymore. Like, that's pretty much breaking the rules.
Pretty powerful. I quit. Yeah.
And I think it's Element Lad who's like, I don't know. And she's just like, don't judge me. Like, get out, like, take your ship. I'm queen. He killed my husband. We're going to bury him with the dogs, I think is what she says. It's one issue where this is the best written Projectra, I want to say ever. Like just with issue 5, this is the best this character's ever been. And it's kind of funny, with 5 issues, he takes 3 women who had always been kind of like the girlfriends and the background characters and he's like, nope. Boom. And he puts them up to a next level. And then do we want to just jump into the Censor Girl story, or is there anything you want to talk about before we get into that?
There's one thing I do want to pick out here before we get there, because there's a whole story. They kind of, everybody gets back to Earth and they're fine. But I did want to note here that after this whole story of the LSV and then the confrontation with the controllers, when there's the next issue, I think it's issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8, 9 or 10. It's the first issue that you see this pattern of Levitt's doing where you have the breather issue, where in V3 very specifically. So in this particular issue, everybody comes back, they throw a big party.
It's like the Claremont baseball issue,
Yeah, exactly. And this is it. You'd see these things in the prior issues of the 70s and 80s too, but this is the first time where we kind of have it almost become a tradition or a requirement in the Legion runs, where you have to have the soap opera has to kind of come to the forefront where all the characters interact with each other on the team. You still have some kind of a B story where some action is happening, but the main story is actually happening in between the characters just on their downtime. And you see this between every major story arc in this run, there is some kind of a downtime issue, which I love. And I live for those issues.
I mean, you're writing, it's character building. So it's you get to really see what they're like when not, quote unquote, in costume or working as a Legionnaire. It's really good stuff.
I mean, I love the not in costume, the just hanging around the headquarters. You see kind of who likes each other, who's hanging out with each other. I mean, I've heard this so many different times. Like the reason why so many people love Block and Timberwolf is just these little moments that they get in these downtime issues. Same with, you're building up that, Lightning Lass, Shrinking Violet friendship, and you're building up. He's doing so much here, because like, honestly, if you don't have this, why do you care about what's going to happen to the characters later on? Like you mentioned the baseball issue with X-Men, like, I mean, I think of those old, I'm not to go on an X-Men tangent, but like nobody cared about Wolverine until they started doing those. Here's Wolverine without his mask, and here's all. And as soon as they kind of take them out of costume, now I care about this person, or now this person gets elevated. And it's the same. Like, okay, Sunboy's a jerk. Like we see this. Okay, Colossal Boy. Here's Colossal Boy with his wife, and here's the fun they can have. It's just, it makes you like the characters more, so that when stuff hits, when bad stuff happens,
you care. Yeah, I mean, Paul strove to make them 3-dimensional, which I think is really the key, the secret to making superhero stories resonate is that you start to treat them like real people. And back to the X-Men example, it's like that's why you care about Cyclops and Jean Grey and Storm, because Claremont presented them as fully fleshed people with foibles and trauma and fears. And I think Paul does it very well here with the Legion. And then the Sensor Girl stuff is just a blast.
The other thing I want to mention that Paul does is he has them not like each other. Like there's the little cliques, which you just didn't see in comics. Like it's like, hey, we're the Avengers. Everybody gets along.
Yeah, we're all friends.
And suddenly it's like, oh, like Phantom Girl really doesn't like Timberwolf. Okay, like that's what's going on here. Yeah, and it's and you're like, okay, they're people. Like they're, because again, if I was on a team of 21 other, I'm sure there'd be one or two people I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hang out with them. Like that's good.
Yeah, it just makes them feel real. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
So so let's fast forward up to Sensor Girl, but we have to take a real quick stop just before we start talking about her arc, because she comes on board with 4 other new Legionnaires, 2 of which are completely non-human or non-humanoid designs, which is that's a new thing, which is great. But this was a really interesting issue for me to read, because you have a lot of things kind of going on. There's the Dark Circle lizard guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Ontier.
Yes, who keeps on coming back. He's a recurring villain, and you have this is kind of their tryout, along with a couple other characters like Mentala, who comes into play later. But the other interesting thing about the introduction of these characters is we're also in a Legion at this point that no longer has the founders officially, right? So and so, Jay, I got to ask you, because this was your Legion when you were reading it, and how did you feel about it?
So Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad had already kind of taken a back seat when she got pregnant, and they were sort of moving away. And then when Cosmic Boy resigned, it was really a sign of like, okay, things are different. Like we're kind of going with like we're moving forward. But I know this is going to sound, I don't want this to sound as callous as it's going to sound, but when I was reading these comics, there was only a few characters that I was like, you can't, like, please don't get rid of these characters. And not like Lightning Lad being gone, I was like, okay, like he's interesting, but like Saturn Girl was the one that I missed the most of the 3 of them. But they wrote her out in a way that I can accept that. You got kids, like go do something different. And if you've been a fan of team books, there's always been people leaving, right? Like the Legion is really the only team book where from 1958 to 1985, these 3 people have been a part of this. Where like again, look at the Avengers, look at X-Men, look at
Defenders,
everybody's leaving, and so it was kind of more like, okay, I understand why they're doing this. And then the fact that Lightning Lad is immediately replaced by Lightning Lass, and then
it works out.
You're like, okay, I can go with this. Like this is fine. I think it's more rereading it now that I realize like how big of a deal it was. When I was a kid, it was just like, okay, we got some new members. But now you read back and go, wow, like you wrote out the Trinity and you never brought Lightning Lad back. Like that was kind of the big thing of it. It was like, wow, like he's just done.
Yeah,
he's gone. Yeah.
Right?
Raising kids.
Yeah, raising kids. Let's give props on that one. Like 1980s, dad staying home raising the kids, good. Mom goes back to work. Like you didn't see that, especially in comic books.
So let's get back to Sensor Girl, because this is an important piece. So
this is the big one.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because the way she's introduced is very similar to back in the Silver Age, how Element Lad was introduced, where Saturn Girl basically says, let her in, just take my word for it. And so then she kind of walks out. And so sure enough, she's a member of the Legion. It obviously has an interesting power set, but there's a whole lot of plot points of the Legionnaires themselves just wondering who this person is.
Just an example of Paul at his strongest, kind of as a plotter, because it's a simmering like C and then B plot for a long time until it pays off, like 15, 20 issues later when we realize who she is. And even then, like now knowing the backstory, he had a different character in mind. I guess we can talk about it. It's initially he'd hoped to make it the pre-crisis Supergirl, but because of the Byrne reboot of Superman, there were not to be any other Kryptonians even in the future. And so he had to pivot, I guess, not mid-story, but his idea had to go out the window, and it became Projectra, which I thought worked really well. I think aside from a few little power snafus, which can all be written off as Projectra's powers.
Absolutely.
It really worked well. And it was a really finely crafted mystery that, and for me, for my money, the best mysteries are the mysteries that are earned, meaning that the reader can figure it out if they're paying attention, as opposed to, oh, it was that character you saw in the background and you didn't even know was there. Right. Those are kind of the cheap, twisty endings, but you can figure out it's Projectra if you're paying attention. There's a lot of red herrings. There's a lot of detours. There's a lot of little false flags, but those are the best mysteries because at the end, you're either feeling like, oh, I solved it, or you're feeling like, oh, I really should have paid more attention to what was going on because he knew it all along.
It really reminded me of the prequel to the Great Darkness saga when he was laying all those seeds and he'd have those little things in the background. And if you knew what you were looking for, you're like, it's obviously Darkseid. And it was the same with this. Like, as you're reading it, when you go back and reread it, you go, okay, it's Projectra.
Yeah.
I mean, like you say, aside from the very beginning, but by the time they really get into the mystery, you go, okay, I see where this is going. And he's done his work. Like it works really, really well. And to me, my favorite part of all of this is, Brainiac 5 basically saying all of the fan theories as it's going on. Like, he's like, I think it's this. And he's kind of going crazy as it's going because it's a mystery he can't solve. It's the one thing he can't figure out. And I think it's this great counterpoint. Yeah. I mean, just a great way to reintroduce a character. And I think also as well, like, tell fans, hey, you didn't think Projectra was important. I've just shown you that she is.
Yeah.
And because you're now a fan of this.
Yeah. And then, I would say also honorable mention here during around this time too for Brainiac 5, because Alex, like you said, this is when the crisis is happening, and of course Kara dies as part of the crisis, and and Brainy is in love with her, so you really get to see his raw emotions on the page, which is I think this is the only time you see him like truly grieving ever in the Legion.
Yeah, and it's a really hard needle to thread, and it goes back to what I was saying about Paul being really good at managing editorial fiat, and we'll see it obviously with the Superboy stuff, but he was able to pivot and create compelling stories, and Claremont has the same strength in terms of, now this character I created, Madeline Pryor, has to be the evil villain of Inferno, or like now Supergirl is being killed in this crossover because she's not going to be a character in the future of the present. So he makes it work. And that's really a testament to someone who can work in a shared universe.
Yeah. Well, he did the same thing with Laurel Kent, right? When they were kind of strong-armed in having to do the Millennium tie-in. So, he ended up basically turning her into a, what was it? Black Star. Dark Star. That was it. Yeah. And it's like, well, nobody really cares.
So, she'd be cool. She would be cool as a Dark Star.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be cool.
No, but I thought that was one of the best ones of the Millennium crossovers. That felt like one of the more organic ones.
Well, and I think that's a tribute to the two of them, right? To both Laurel and also because they had earned it by having Laurel Kent show up and be this important character, and was dating Sunboy at the time. And then it's this shift, and it's like, and again, nobody saw that coming.
When I was reading these, I really did enjoy the Tales of the Legion stuff. And I think a lot of people give it short shrift because it's like, oh, these are just like B stories. But I knew Terry Shoemaker's art now. You obviously know Dan Jurgens, but I really loved his art. And I thought Levitz did a nice job juggling two books together and juggling all these different plots. And, it never feels like he loses steam until he ends. The Magic Wars was an epic thing. And now I'm wondering if we need to do a third Baxter Era episode to kind of, like maybe we go up to Censor Girl and then continue again. I'd be game for that.
That'll be that's something to talk about. Yeah, great call it on the Tales issues. I do think they get a short shrift. The fact that they haven't been reprinted, I think, is really sad. Like, I think they should have those. And you're right. Terry Shoemaker is one of those artists who I can't believe didn't get bigger. Like, because Dan Jurgens obviously, and you can see it when you're reading those comics, like, wow, Dan Jurgens is going to be something. But I thought the same thing about Shoemaker as well. The other person, Mindy Newell, I thought, for kind of being dropped into this hugely chaotic mess, being a new creator, I was really impressed what she did. I mean, there's a few misses, but nothing that is just a new writer figuring out her spot. And when she hits really well. Like, I wanted to see more of her stuff as well.
There were some stories that felt like, this is going to date myself, like annual stories. Like, oh, these are just kind of like fodder stories. Mm-hmm. But I think by and large, Tales counts as part of the main Legion canon. I mean, it's written, plotted at least by Levitz. And I think people that talk about the Legion, especially the Levitz era, and just limit it to the Great Darkness Saga are missing out on a lot of great stories. And a lot of stories that really build off the Great Darkness Saga into this big kind of opus of the future of the DC Universe. And I hope we see some of that. I mean, I'm a fan of Josh and I'm a fan of Hayden's, and so I'm excited to see what they cook up. But I think there's a certain element to the Levitz Giffen stuff and the Levitz LaRoque and Lightle stuff that has been missing for a long time. Even in the Retro Brood, it's hard. You can't really put the genie back in the bottle. I think that term is kind of clunky now, but I mean, you can't recapture it. And so that's the challenge of the Legion. Like, how do you take this team that was so woven into the lore and then pulled out of the lore by Zero Hour, how do you reintegrate it and make it all feel like lived in? I think that's really the big challenge coming in.
Yeah, and we'll see.
Yeah.
And I think, we do kind of goof on the tail stuff every now and then, but I think it is something that we should have a dedicated episode for. At the end of the day,
For sure, yeah, it's a lot to
Jay
cover.
Chagrin.
What?
I'm kidding.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
No, the stuff I don't want to go back and reread.
Yeah, yeah. What do you not want to reread?
I'm rereading it right now. It's Legion Lost Volume 2. Wow. I'm just like, there's nothing like reading a Legion comic and just knowing they didn't know anything about the Legion. Like, that's what gets me about the book. Is it's just so obvious they don't know the characters in it. But anyways, that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about to praise what is good Legion. So
yeah, I mean, there's really so much ground to cover. I feel like we could keep going for like another hour, but we can't.
Yeah, I know. And we'd only be digging into the specific plots. I mean, we've already talked about Universo Project early on our podcast, and we've also talked about the death of Superboy, and a little bit on the attack on the Time Trapper, because we focused on the Time Trapper. So we've actually talked about a lot of these different things already on the podcast because they're so seminal, right?
Yeah, the Superboy stuff, is really the best example of Paul being just the best team player. I think we talked about it too, like his ability to weave a story out of these like editorial mandates and make it compelling. Like when I got to Superboy's death, I felt it. I was like, wow, he's dead. Yeah. And this is the character we've known this whole time. Maybe it wasn't the quote unquote real Superboy, but there wasn't a real Superboy. So this was it.
Yeah.
And he really made it count. I think what makes it lose some of its steam is that they stopped the book for me being able to reference him. Yeah. And that's something that really kicked in 5 years later. And then you kind of see Giffen shine as the editorial fiat dance around. Like he's able to manage that really well. Or the beer bombs too. I think Tom and Mary deserve some credit there too.
So I think it's one of the most fascinating things about this volume 3 is it's the first time in Legion history where they have to play in a bigger sandbox, right? And because like everything that comes before this, they're kind of in their own little world. And you'd have like a Brave and the Bold issue where Batman would show up for once and they would be done. And it never had any effect. But this is suddenly like, okay, we've got to tie into Crisis. So Supergirl's gone, deal with that. Okay, now we've got to tie into
Millennium.
Like Legends. Cosmic Boy is going to go back. You got to deal with Legends now. So now you don't have Superman. And then, next, here's Millennium. I mean, the whole plot of the Millennium crossover makes no sense at all.
Right.
Right? Like, and yet the issue kind of works, but it's still like, it's the whole premise of the Millennium is like Manhunters waited 1,000 years to betray, but for the Legion, it's 2,000 years.
Right.
Huh? Like, but somehow it's still a compelling story, right?
And somebody shot Laurel Kent and nobody noticed she was a robot? I mean, come on.
I think structurally Millennium works in terms of like letting the other books play with the main thesis. But yeah, the idea that the Legion 1,000 years later is then engaging with the present day plot, it just doesn't work. And even the Crisis stuff, at least you could say, there's some time waves happening. There's like weird stuff happening that's affecting us in the future. But I think the Legion does work best when it's left alone and can echo what's happening in the present, but doesn't have to be directly tied into whatever crossover of the moment is happening.
Yeah. And a couple other things, and we'll wrap it up here. We are going to have I think in a few weeks, we're actually having a discussion about the Magic Wars storyline specifically. So we'll go deep into that one in a few weeks. But I did the other thing while we're wrapping up here before we turn everything off here. I did want to mention to kind of wrap up and put a circle on the Censor Girl story. The interplay that she has with the Empress, with Saria, is really good.
Intense.
The fact that it's the Empress who actually unmasks Censor Girl to be Projectra, and then the last beat where Censor Girl basically gets rid of the eye, and then that kills Saria. At first, it was funny when I did the reread. I could have sworn when I read this, several years ago in my last reread, I just thought, and maybe I just kind of short wired it in my head or pencil lipped it, where I thought Projectra had again killed a person, right? Because I thought she actually killed Saria, but no, it's the link between the two, her and the eye, that was what made that happen. I just thought that was so good. It's that's probably the most memorable part of this run.
I think it's Leroy's best art of the run.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like we talked earlier about how like all these women are getting elevated, right? So we're elevating these Legion women. We're also elevating Emerald Empress to a point where like she's recreating the Fatal Five and she doesn't want anything to do with, most of them. And then what is it? 3 of the 5 in the Fatal Five are women. And then you actually have an issue where we feel sorry for the Emerald Empress right before she dies. Like to make her an empathetic character, like I just want freedom. I just want to be released.
Yeah.
And Projectra doesn't know what she's going to do, like doesn't know the consequences. Like it's just such good writing, such good plotting. Great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think just kind of as a big wrap up here, like if you're a Legion fan and you haven't read Volume 3, I cannot recommend this enough. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's a trade for all of this. Like I don't know how to find it. And I'll be honest, like we bugged, like when we bugged Paul when he says, "What do you need in a trade?" And we're like, Volume 3 Legion Superheroes. Like that's the first thing out of my mouth. So if you can find this, like I highly recommend it. It's definitely worth reading.
It's all on the app if you have the app.
Yeah, it's all on the app. Yeah.
If you got on the app, check it out. There's some just great individual issues, some great moments. If you love Polar Boy, he's got some great bits to it. One of the best Timberwolf stories is in here when he goes to enact Karate Kid's will. If you like, you'll understand why people now love Projectra and love Lightning Lass. If you couldn't figure that out before, it's just, I mean, the highs are so high. And I would say even like the low issues where you go like, it's still better than.
It's still decently written.
It's still pretty solid comics, even when it's not like batting 1,000.
Yeah.
So here's the big question. This is going to be the last question, and then we'll let you go, Alex. Is V3 better than Great Darkness Saga?
Wow. I think Great Darkness Saga is this like explosion, like this big bang moment for the Legion. Like this is the modern Legion and this is how it's going to be. And I think a lot of people treat it as its own thing. And like, this is the best Legion story, which it is. But for me, I took more pleasure reading Volume 3, which was a nice run with these characters, seeing them interact with each other and have their foibles and have their arguments and fight these threats and kind of the ebb and flow that, I would say, I mean, I love Great Darkness Saga. I think it's a great standalone story, but if you want a good Legion run, like do Volume 3. Like if you want like 60 odd issues of just great comics, like just do Volume 3.
What about you, Jay?
I love it. So I will say this, like, I don't think there's a story in Volume 3 that's as good as the Great Darkness Saga. Like I think just as a 5-issue story, that's peak. But I agree with Alex. Like if I'm thinking like from 283 or 4 when Levitz takes over to 303 or 305, I keep going back to like, that's my, like, to me, that's the peak Legion. But I mean, this is a very close number 2. And I don't think it's a bad thing to say that the only thing that this run isn't better than peak Giffen Levitz.
In V2. Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like saying, what's better, the White Album or Revolver? Like to go back to the Lennon McCarthy thing. And you're well, it's a personal taste thing as well. And you go like, you're not going to go wrong. But I just think, again, like the Levitz Giffen, the Volume 2 is always going to have, because that's what got me into the Legion. Like that was the one that snared me. But this is so damn good. And it's better than anything else. Like, I'm sorry.
And I mean, I love 5 Years Later, but none of it would exist without this stuff. So
Exactly. Yeah. Jim, what do you think? Since you asked us the tough question.
Yeah, that's only fair. Yeah, I think I'm kind of plotting along with where you guys are going, right? I think that as an actual story arc with other things thrown in, Great Darkness is the touchstone work for, if you want to understand the Legion of Superheroes, read this. But if you want to understand why the Legion is so beloved and why everybody falls in love with the characters, read V3, because you have the amazing stories that are being told, but then you have the soap opera stuff and the cliques and the interpersonal relationships. Violet finally becoming who she is and kind of growing from that. These characters transform over the course of 63 issues, and that to me is the best thing.
All right, on that note, we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to let the audience decide. So if you want a Volume 3 Part 2, send us an email, let us know on Bluesky. If you want us to just go next into 5 years later, let us know. And whichever gets the most votes, that's what we're going to go with. So
I'll be on either one.
There you go. It's audience participation. You keep saying that.
We're going to do 3 5 years later episodes. And I think we have you pegged for the first one.
Do them all.
Yeah. So All good.
Awesome.
All right. Before you take off, what would you like the audience to know? Like, what should they be checking from you? What's new in your world?
I've got a new Star Trek horror series, Star Trek Halloween, which is a Holosuite murder mystery on Deep Space Nine, coming out in October, fittingly, with Bailey Rosalind on art from IDW. And also the Forgotten Five Kickstarter just got concluded and funded, and people are getting their books, which is cool. And we're still serializing that on the Patreon. What else? I just finished off my Star Wars run for Marvel. And Daredevil, Enemy of My Enemy, my latest crime novel starring Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, came out in March. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but that's a lot.
Well, you can get that on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, anywhere.
Great.
All right, all good. So awesome when he comes and joins us, just because I love the behind the scenes stuff, also to kind of just get that sense. And I think as well, like, I mean, again, all of our guests love the Legion. It's so refreshing to see somebody who actually could write them one day and still loves them. So
Absolutely.
The fact that he keeps wanting to come back is also
and deal with us. Oh my gosh.
It's like, dude, are you sure you want to volunteer for this? So it's all good. And we also let the cat out of the bag for everyone who's been asking us about a 5 years later, we have 3 episodes planned out for the future, because 5 years later,
it's a beast.
Look, I've written close to 10,000 words about 5 years later. So it's going to be a big one.
Yeah. You already know what Jay is going to say if you read his articles.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of Jay, where can we find them?
There we go. Where can you find me? So speaking of those articles, and as I mentioned during the episode, I'm in the middle of Retroboot. These columns are at jmlonglivethelegion.blogspot.com. You can find me on Bluesky at jmckernan.bsky.social, and you can find me on Discord or on Reddit under the username Drake Burrows. And Jim, where can they find you?
I have my Legion Reviews website at jimboslegion.blogspot.com, where I try to post a new comic review or a think piece every now and then that's Legion related or Legion adjacent. You can find me personally at Bluesky at jimbofett.bsky.social, on Reddit as jimbofett87, and on Discord as jimbofett on the Legion Fan Club Discord, as well as the Certain Point of View Discord. If you want to follow the podcast or get access to the Legion Discord, we are at longlivethelegion.bsky.social, or send us an email and tell us what you think at longlivethelegion2025@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star rating on your podcatcher of choice, or even give us 2. That helps with the algorithms. And I got that word right this time.
The more 5-star reviews, the better. There's one more thing I wanted to call out. We haven't called this out yet in any of the episodes. So these are other podcasts that we've appeared on. So if you like listening to us for whatever reason, and you want to hear us not talk about the Legion, Jim and I both appeared on Men of Steel, looking back at the old, Legends of the Dead Earth.
Yep.
So you did Superboy and I did one of the Superman books. And I probably shouldn't hype this, but I'm going to. I'm also on an episode of Another Pass where we talk about Hudson Hawk.
It's a great episode.
And it's one of those movies, I don't like guilty pleasure movies because I really like the movie, even though I know it's bad. So I don't consider it a guilty pleasure because I will tell everybody that I liked it.
No, it's a fun listen. It is so good.
Yeah.
And you break Case's brain all the time. So it was funny.
Exactly. Yeah. I break Case's brain, I think, at least 3 times. And I was like, I've won. So anyways, check that out as well. It's definitely worth a listen.
Oh, and then we were on the Transmetropolitan YouTube podcast, Word from Tomorrow, which was going, I believe it's fully released now, where Case and guests including us, go through each volume of the Transmetropolitan trades from back in the late 90s and into the 2000s. And so that's all up on YouTube, and you can check it out now.
All right. On that note, let's close up the mission monitor board. Let's call it a day. And I think there's only one more thing to do. Long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion.
Long live the Legion.
All right, Josue, let's go through our new Comic Day stack. We have a lot to review.
I know. Maybe we've gone too far.
Well, let's see. Marvel, of course. DC.
I got Image, Dark Horse,
Black Mask, Boom, IDW.
Aftershock, Vault, of course, Mad Cave,
Oni, Valiant, Scout.
Magma, Behemoth.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, all we need now is a name for our show. We need a name for our show about reviewing comic books every week. Something clever, but not too clever.
Like a pun? It's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it's something that seems funny at first, but we might regret later on as an impulsive decision a few dozen episodes in.
Yeah, we'll think of something.
Join Keith and Josue for We Have Issues, a weekly show reviewing almost every new comic released each week. Available on Geek Elite Media and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.